Today on Passion for Food, we're going to be making the best biscuits and gravy. Now, this is a sausage gravy recipe perfected over 200 years, although arguably a lot longer than that. But don't worry, ours won't take nearly that long to make. In fact, you can make this whole thing start to finish in about 30 minutes if you're in a hurry. So let's go ahead and jump in here and get started. And the first thing we want to do is prepare our sausage gravy. I love my trusty Dutch oven for this, but it would pan out just fine with a different cooking vessel. To which we're going to add about 1 pound of a nice quality breakfast sausage, although you could make this with just about any kind of ground meat that you would like. And we just want to season liberally with salt and pepper to taste. Now, I don't know about you, but I like my biscuits, sausage, and gravy a little extra peppery, so I'm going to crack in extra black pepper here. So now that we've spiced things up a bit, it's time just to cook this over high heat. Now, unless we're trying to stretch this out even further, we don't need to add any additional oil. Although there is plenty of room to stretch here. Fun fact, biscuits and gravy actually emerged as a regional southern dish after the American Revolutionary War that ended in 1783. At the time, certain stocks of foods were low or hard to find, so this was a great dish to stretch things out that you could make with whatever you had on hand. And speaking of what you have on hand, I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of flour. Now, the general rule of thumb here is to add as much flour as you have oil in the pan. If you're just using the pound of sausage, you're probably going to need about a 1/4 cup of flour, but I just like to keep adding it in handfuls until you basically can't see any more fat in the pan. We want to get all of that flour incorporated, and we're essentially just making a basic roux here, which is what is going to actually thicken our gravy, but we do want to just continue cooking it a little bit to get rid of that raw flour flavor. Once we see there's definitely no more loose oil in the pan and our flour has had a moment to cook, you might notice it sticking to the bottom a little bit. That's okay, don't panic, but we definitely don't want to burn that. So let's go ahead and add our milk. Now, water works just fine here as well. And the amount of milk we need varies depending on how much flour we use, but I wound up using about 2 cups. You pretty much want to just add milk until the gravy is the thickness you would like it to be. We definitely want to scrape around the bottom of the pot. We want to get up all of those little bits of flour that were starting to stick. And as we come up to temperature, it'll also thicken, so you'll be able to judge better how much more milk you want to add. Just remember to let it come back up to temperature before you add any more. It's easy to add more milk, you can't really remove any. But once it's a thickness that we like, our sausage gravy is pretty much ready. Although this is the ideal time to pause for a moment and give it a quick taste for seasoning. The salt was good, but I felt like it needed more pepper. I'm like Sergeant Pepper, I just can't get enough. So back to the grind we go here. But this is why tasting it yourself and not just trusting to measurements is so important. Just because I love it this way doesn't mean you will, or vice versa. So taste your sausage gravy and adjust it to just the way you like it. At which point we can just lightly cover this and let it simmer on low while we prepare our biscuits. I'm going to be using a food processor just to speed things up, but these are quite easy to make by hand as well. And we're going to be starting with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, along with 1 full tablespoon of baking powder, not baking soda. We need the double action, along with 1 teaspoon of salt. And last but not least, 1 stick, that's half a cup of cold butter straight from the fridge. And you can totally use lard or even oil for this, but it's ideal with butter, so if you have that, definitely use it. We just want to cut that up into our flour. If you don't have a food processor, you just want to dump all of this into a bowl and rub it together with your fingers until you wind up with fine crumbs. But if you're using a food processor like me, you just want to pulse it on and off until all of that butter gets incorporated. It'll look something like beach sand. If you still have some little lumps, that's no big deal. And if you've never made this with the food processor, give it a try. I really love how quick and easy it is. And this would be a great time to turn our oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit before we finish preparing these biscuits. Now, you may have noticed that full tablespoon of baking powder and thought that was quite a lot. Well, the reason is I'm using 3/4 of a cup of whole milk here today instead of buttermilk. So without that acidity, we're only going to wind up activating about half the leavening power of the baking powder. So if you do use buttermilk, you can cut the baking powder about in half. Now, at this point, the difference between a good biscuit and a bad biscuit is how you mix it. Mainly, don't overmix it. We really just want to stir this until everything comes together into a dough and then just leave it alone. This is definitely one of those cases where you don't want to knead the dough. Otherwise, you risk your biscuits coming out a little tough. So once our biscuit dough comes together, we just want to go ahead and get this rolled or pressed out. Which is something I could have sworn I had footage of, but whoops, I guess that record button's a little tricksy. Just use your imagination. I know, you can roll something out. It's fine. I rolled this to about a 1/2 inch, but you can certainly go thicker if you want bigger biscuits. And I'm just going to use the rim of a glass to get these cut out real quick. Now, fun fact, in America we call these biscuits, but in most of the rest of the world, biscuits are what we would refer to as cookies, and these would be actually called scones. I once actually got into an argument with someone over what the differences were between biscuits and scones, which turns out is the dumbest argument of all time, because literally it's just a different word for the same thing. And the main differences just really are the presentation, aka what you're serving the biscuits or scones with. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Let's get the rest of these cut out, and you can see more or less the thickness that we're going for. So let's just go ahead and get these onto our ready sheet pan. And as for our leftover scraps of biscuit dough, we can easily just grab some of that and form it into more biscuits. But as for the rest that wouldn't fit on the pan here, I decided to just bag that up and make a mini apple turnover the next day. Maybe I'll share that recipe sometime later with you folks. Anyway, let's go ahead and whisk these off to our preheated 450-degree oven. And we're going to cook these between 10 and 15 minutes depending on your oven and how brown you want the tops. So we'll go ahead and pull our now golden brown biscuits out of the oven, and the key to these is getting butter on them while they're still hot. Now, I guess we could call this step optional, especially because we're putting gravy on them anyway, but, you know, I still would. And I'm not just trying to butter you up. Well, actually, I'm trying to butter up these biscuits. Anyway, let's grab one of these and give these biscuits and gravy a try. I really think it's the time-honored simplicity of that sausage gravy that really makes the best biscuits and gravy. This is definitely an American Southern classic, but most of the time when you get it from restaurants, especially fast food places, it's pretty sparse on the sausage. But making it at home this way, we can make it super hearty and super savory with the amount of sausage that we have in there. It's a super filling, hearty, affordable meal on its own, but I like pairing mine with a couple of over-easy eggs. It really is an excellent combination, and with those runny yolks, it's kind of like having gravy on your gravy. It's like gravyception. It really is pretty dreamy. Anyway, that's enough yoking around. Let's go ahead and do a deep dive here and give this a try. I love the pepperiness of that sausage gravy, and the soft, slightly crisp texture we got on those biscuits is perfect. Honestly, sausage and gravy biscuits really are the best. I could probably eat these every single day. I mean, I definitely shouldn't, but I definitely could. I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Passion for Food. If you have, give me a thumbs up below and consider subscribing and hitting that little bell so you don't miss our future episodes. And if you'd like to see more, check out one of our awesome recipes up on the screen now. This has been Graham with Passion for Food.